FCO, NTDO 212, com check.
DPS, go. Inco, go. PUS, go. Surgeon, go. Booster, go. Copy that. We have a go from you guys.
This is Talking Sound.
Hey everybody, how y'all doing? Welcome to the live broadcast, actually. Surprise, you are here at a live podcast right now. That is exactly how easy it is to do. It doesn't take a whole lot of equipment. It doesn't take a whole lot of gear or know-how. That's kind of what we're here for. Hopefully everyone who's here is interested in podcasting, maybe starting a podcast with your friends, family. My name is Chris Jordan. I'm the host of the Dudes and Beer podcast as well as the Talking Sound podcast on the HC Universal Network. Next to me is Amy.
I'm Amy Jordan, and I'm the host of the Yes But Why podcast. And this is Billy.
And I'm Billy Stewart. I am one of the hosts of the Scary Dad podcast.
And we all belong to the fairly newly formed HC Universal Network. There's probably about 7 podcasts on the network now. But all of us kind of DIY'd our own podcast into what it is, leaning on each other's knowledge. Billy, as long as I've known him, and that's probably been about half my life now, has been a master of gathering niche things and just being on the pulse of pop culture and things like that. And that's really what he kind of did with his podcast, was go into a very niche market, very specified place. My wife, being a comedian, that was the natural place for her to go with her podcast, was comedy. I myself started with the Talking Sound podcast because, well, I actually do conventions and stuff like this on the daily. I'm a live AV technician. That's what I do for a living. So for me, hey, all right.
Speaking of
DVI
live audio,
cables.
video technicians,
That's right. Hot
right
dog.
on time. Here's another one who will provide us with a lovely cable.
So, yeah, we do have some PowerPoint stuff. You can see your packet there. All of that information is for y'all to take. Feel free to take it. There's some stuff that I generally use whenever I'm helping people craft podcasts. I've probably helped about 6 or 7 people produce podcasts now. And like I said, it's fairly easy. It takes just a small amount of equipment to get one going. And like a prime example is I've got my phone here. I could literally just plug in this microphone into my phone and use the app for my platform to go live. Even SoundCloud now has live features, stuff like that, if you have a paid platform with them. So, hey, all right, there we have it.
Look, it's a
So,
PowerPoint.
yeah, there is our PowerPoint. How about that? So, let's get into a little bit of the basic equipment that it takes to run a podcast. The first off is, of course, a computer and internet connection. Even your phone would be considered the computer or internet connection. Like I said, I literally did a live broadcast from the waiting room as they were taking me into the birth of my son. Like I was podcasting as I went into the room and hit stop.
It's a true story.
A true story. It's just that easy to do it. You need like no computer in front of you. You can do everything from your phone with apps, stuff like that. It's great. Aside from that, some kind of recording software. Billy actually has his rig with him. That's kind of an example of the portable recorder method, where you don't even use your phone. You literally just bring a portable recorder like what I've got going here for our backup, just that and a small microphone. And his mic is one that does circular pattern, so you could have 8, 9 people around a table and be able to pick everybody up. It's not like you have to spend $100 per microphone and have 8 of them.
Yeah, don't let people tell you need to spend $100.
Literally. That's one of my first things that I tell everybody is you're basically building a home studio here. Remember, you're going to grow, and as you grow, your needs will grow. Buy something that's forward compatible, most definitely. Like if you're getting a mixer, microphone, USB mixer interface, this is my interface that I use portably. It's just a little Scarlett. They cost about $120 on Amazon, but it's got 2 inputs, one for a line in, like a guitar or something like that, and one for a microphone. But you can plug in a standard mic like this right into the 1/4 inch and still have 2 mics. And inside of a recording program, that lets you record more than one track, or you can record both of them as the same, all that kind of stuff.
One of the things you want to make sure.
Pull that mic over to you, Billy.
Sorry, a lot of people get bogged down in equipment early
Yeah.
on. Sometimes people use equipment as kind of a shield from actually creating content because they're like,
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm doing, I don't know how to do it. I'll get a podcast started as soon as I can figure out this software or as soon as I can afford this whatever. When we started the Scary Dad podcast, I didn't know if we were going to make it past episode 3. And you can go on eBay and you can find a whole lot of expensive podcasting equipment for pretty cheap because people who had the grand idea they were going to start something but just never got around to it. So I've got about $60 worth of equipment. We just published our 84th episode. We've got 84 regular episodes and about a dozen or more midweek episodes, all on this piece.
Yeah.
Not counting the stuff I've done on the phone, but just it's all about content. Equipment will get you there, but it's the stuff. So don't get intimidated by equipment.
Yeah. And there's a typical wiring pattern that you can see. That little schematic is there. It's y'all's to take. That's a typical multi-input mixer setup for one. Like I said, it's also just as easy as these little $30 Movo microphones. And it comes with 2 mics, and they both plug right into your phone.
It's like a little lapel mic.
Yeah, it's a little lapel mic. It's got a headphone, so if you're cueing intros or outros or anything like that, you can hear it. But they work perfectly fine. Yeah. I had to take it off and surrender it.
Yeah.
That was very hard to surrender my gear, but it was my baby. And
Can I just say
Yeah.
one side thing? As you noticed when we started talking about the AV stuff, the guy comes in with the cable, right? And we're like 2 minutes into the thing. Technical difficulties happen all the time, and it's totally okay. I have lost a number of podcast episodes to technical difficulties, so now this is my backup. Every time I got all this stuff going, you just hit record on that voice recorder, and if nothing else works, you've got this as a backup. So just throwing that out there.
Yep.
I know it seems like he's talking about a lot of stuff that maybe you're like, what is that thing with all the holes and where do you plug? I have no idea, right? Nothing. That's why he made the schematic. It was for me. And now we thought, well, other people might not know what I don't know as well. But just so you know, you have a backup. We all have one in our pocket. You're safe.
That's
You're
right.
not going to put effort into like an hour of work and then all of a sudden be all like, and the computer turned off. Thank you so much for your time. We're going to have this in our memory banks and we're going to have a good time.
that's
But
happened. I've literally had this same computer right here overheat on about a 110-degree day at the
just
Marble
don't know.
Falls Adult Soapbox Derby, and my show kept just shutting down and shut like in the middle of a live broadcast.
yeah,
So it was
podcasting
like-
in Texas, worry.
Okay, out popped the lapel mics in my phone, and I just kept going live with my phone. I was like, my phone hasn't shut off as the Wi-Fi hotspot all day, so I guess that'll work.
Cool, I just wanted to say that little bit about
Yeah.
equipment before we moved on.
And that's
So I was
just
like, don't
it.
be afraid.
Don't let
I
the
know nothing.
equipment keep you from doing it, is what we're saying. Make sure that you, by all means, start recording episodes. There was someone in the back earlier that was actually saying he and his friend have already started recording test episodes. As a producer, I highly recommend that.
It's great.
Highly recommend it. Of course, I'm the host of the Dudes and Beer podcast. One of the things we do is drink beer on the air. We also talk about crazy topics, and sometimes we have people that are like water commissioners and stuff like that on our show while we're drinking beer. And yeah, an hour and a half in, you can be like, hey, what the hell were we just talking about? And that's one of the many reasons why in show prep, it's very important to have that kind of stuff ready. To have your research, like he said, go through and make some test recordings. See if you and your buddy actually jive behind a microphone. It's totally different Jack and Jaw whenever you're driving down the road, playing games, hanging out. But once a microphone's in front of your face, you'd be surprised how stymieing it can be at first. Just because, oh my God, I actually sound like that? Because you're going to be hearing your own voice a lot. And Go ahead.
Other thing I was thinking is if you listen to podcasts, listen to the way that they talk to each other. Do they give each other space to speak? Do they ask a question and then there's a bit of silence? Or is it talking over each other? Which do you prefer? Whatever you prefer, because some people love it when it's cacophony. People are like, this is the best. I personally like a good chat back and forth. I want to hear what everyone has to say. So that's why mine has a very, when I talk to people, I ask them a question, there's time for them to consider, that kind of thing. But some people prefer, and when you add beer, there's a lot of talking. So whatever you guys like, that's what your audience is going to like. You are your own audience. So make it the way you want to hear it.
Yeah. And getting into actively building a show, you really do have to think about branding. And when I say that, it's things like, number one, are you going to be podcasting professionally or just for fun? There are totally podcasts out there that are into their hundreds and hundreds of episodes that make zero money, that have zero sponsors. They don't care. As Bill Murray would say in Meatballs, it just doesn't matter. They're going to do it anyway. And that's probably, whenever I started, I'm a research-based person. Whenever I started looking into doing this, I started researching a lot of how long before you get sponsors, how long before this. And the biggest thing that I read out of anything was get ready to be alone for a year. Get ready to be talking to yourself or whoever's on the other side of that microphone for a year.
And don't worry.
Yeah.
Because your first couple episodes, you're gonna hit record. You're gonna research out a plot. You're gonna be like, man, we're gonna talk about the Evil Dead series. That's 3 movies. We're gonna hit all points. We're gonna nail it. And 15 minutes later, you're like, and I'm done. Because you're not used to it, right? You've hit all your points. You nail. You're like, this is good. That's good. That's good. That's good. We're out. It takes a while. So your next episode will be 20, and then 30, and then. So you'll build it up, but then it doesn't matter because nobody's listening to you anyway.
Yeah.
So you can screw up all you want at the beginning. It's the most forgiving platform there really is.
Yeah.
And don't let that hold you back. If right now we just told you no one's going to listen to you for a year, that makes you super sad. No, don't be sad. Don't be sad. Number one, your mom's going to listen. She loves this. She loves your podcast. Guys, she loves it. And then also, you're going to have your core friends who are going to be there.
Yeah.
They're going to help you out with things like, hey, I listened to this. It seemed weird. It'll get the kinks out, because your friends aren't afraid to tell you things are bad, right? So, but at the same time, let that be freeing. Let the idea that you're on your own be freeing and not bad. Because as soon as you start getting people, as soon as you get into your personal rhythm, that's when people want to be listening to you, or they want to be part of your community and that kind of thing. And then they'll go back. I mean, I've had people call, send me messages about episodes from 2 years ago, and I'm all like, well, aren't you sweet for listening? That's so nice. I didn't think anyone was ever going to hear that. I almost should have erased it from the internet. But, you get to learn, you get to be better, and then you get to have your joy of saying what you want to talk about or spreading the information that you're interested in. It's good. And don't let that scare you away from it, believe me.
Well, and I think the biggest thing to remember is the fact that, and we'll get into it here in a few minutes whenever Amy goes specifically into social networking, but it's that podcasting is a community. As opposed to just about anything else out there entertainment-wise and I did broadcast for years, stuff like that. It is cutthroat, man. But when it comes to podcasting, it's no different than a Comic-Con. We're all into this thing for the same reason. For some reason, we have a buzz in our head about something, and we want to share that with other people. Because obviously there's other people out there that are as deeply into Mario as I am. So I'm going to start a Mario podcast. And I guarantee you, if you started a straight-up Mario podcast, Nintendo may give you a cease and desist at some point. But all press is good press. Think about that. Think as a geek, think about what that did for E-Bomb's world. Whenever he was doing all the old G.I. Joe videos and they sent him the cease and desist and then he posted it, that just skyrocketed him from tens of thousands to millions of people knowing about his website. So you can't even let that scare you, and it really is the fact of you finding yourself, finding your voice and your unique way of saying that. And that's kind of what the show focus is, that kind of stuff. Find something that you love and that you would vivaciously talk to anybody about for 3 or 4 hours, and trim it down to 35. And there's a show. And it's just that easy. One of the most important things that you can possibly do is actually writing a good show description. And the main reason for this is Google. We all carry our Imperial probe droids with us everywhere that we go. But Google, Facebook, all of these things are metrically tied together. And when your show description is the same across all platforms, when you go to a Facebook page, and that's the description. When you go to a Google Plus page, and that's the description. When you go to a website, and that's the description. You're now planting those same keywords all over the internet with your show name mentioned numerous times, things like that. It slowly white hats Google and lets you get closer to the top of Google search ratings without paying money. Things like that are hugely important. That's part of the branding that we're talking about. Coming up with a good logo, coming up with colors that you think emanate what you're talking about. Why don't you go into some of that with your stuff, Billy? Because the Scary Dad logo and everything was something that I remember whenever you came up with it. You morphed from a DIY website into a podcast.
Right.
So.
Well, I mean, I'm discussing finding niche and stuff like that. So I've always been a horror fan as long as I can remember. And so I guess around 2012, I was playing on Facebook a lot in different groups and pages. And it occurred to me that most of what I wanted to talk about, I was kind of creating the content. Like, I was finding people, but they were reflecting back to me stuff that I was saying. So I was like, well, why am I giving Facebook all of this content? Like, why am I filling out, why am I doing forum posts? And I'm using all of this brain trust. You know, I could just build my own website, my own blog, and post it there. And maybe I could earn enough money to, you know, pay for the hosting, pay for equipment, pay for raw materials. So Scary Dad started as a vanity blog for my home haunting stuff. So I make stuff out of plywood, I make stuff out of foam, I build PVC monsters. My house is that house in the neighborhood. On Halloween, that's the one everyone wants to go to. On Christmas, it's Griswoldian. Like, I'm just that guy. And it took me a while to sell this idea to my wife, and then now she won't. Like, this last year, I was sick or something, didn't want to do it. She's like, nope, you have to do it. Get your ass out there. So it kind of builds from there. So it is a passion. But I started Scary Dad, and I wanted a logo, and you can go online, you can pay somebody, but I knew a guy who drew comics. And so I reached out to him. I gave him a basic idea. I sketched out a picture of a skull and crossbones with a Frankenstein head. And he sent me back a couple of versions of it. I told him I like the eyes on this one, I like the teeth on this one, I like the hair on that one. He morphed them, gave me a logo. This is probably the best thing that's on my website, honestly, because everybody.
The new banner's nice.
Well, you're very good.
Everybody recognizes the logo. They might not have ever heard the show, but they'll be like, "Oh, I've seen that."
That's right.
That's
Whether or not you've had a Big Mac, you know what the golden arches are.
So the logo matters, and you know you can draw it yourself if you're an artist, or you can spend, but you can find people that'll do it and do it well. Yeah,
and I mean, on that note, I don't have a Fiverr code right now. I'm busy getting those for the network for all of us. But go to Fiverr, quite literally. You can go there, spend like $25. People will send you about 15 samples of a logo, all that kind of stuff, and it's yours in perpetuity. But like, here's our logos. They were outside on the poster. The network logo, all of that kind of stuff. It's something that, like he was saying, simplistic, but that gets the point across and sticks in your brain. Like I said, you may not have had a Big Mac, but guaranteed you know what the golden arches are. Like, I have been in probably about 20 countries in the world, and everybody knows what McDonald's is. Whether or not they've gone in there and eaten, they know what it is.
They make fun
And
of
that,
us for
yeah,
doing that.
it's the cleanest restroom you can find in a lot of places. So, little travel tip, folks. But with that in mind, let's go ahead and start getting into some of the social networking stuff with Amy here, because, well, I guess into the niche branding, actually,
niche
with
branding.
Billy
Niche
is
branding
first.
first.
So,
Well, like I said, I had this little vanity blog, and I'd been kind of working on it, and started off pretty heavy, and then I got another kid, and then we moved, and then the first kid learned how to walk and talk, and sitting down and writing every day just got really tough. And so I kind of let it fall off a little bit, and it was just kind of parked. I mean, I kept paying the bill every couple of years for hosting, but I didn't ever really mess with it. And then one day, about a year and a half ago, I'm also a comics nerd. I was looking for some comics, and somebody told me that this guy had them, and so I called him and was like, hey, you know, do you have those Sandman books? He's like, yes, I do. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to come over to your house. And I just walked into his house, and we started chatting, and like an hour later, it was like, did we just become best friends? It was just like that.
I remember the day you called me about
and,
that.
So he called me a couple days later, and he actually works for Comicpalooza, and he's out running around right now. And he called me up, and he's like, hey, I had an idea. Do you want to do something? I was like, yeah, what's that? He's like, we need to build a horror convention for Houston. And I was like, that sounds good. Whose money are we going to use? Because I don't have any. And he's like, me either. I was like, all right. So the first thing we need to do is find out who is interested in this and who might want to come. And in order to do that, we need to reach out. And so we had a brainstorming session, notebooks in hand. How can we make this happen? And one thing was, well, first we need to create a brand. We need to have people know who we are, that kind of thing. And then it's like, okay, well, why don't we just do a podcast? We can sit down, we can talk about scary things, like kind of dovetail it off of the blog that exists already. You know, we already had the branding going on. And we can do this. So we sat down. I think the first episode was, what's your favorite scary movie? Which would, of course, just be the typical starting point. And then we just went from there. And when you think about the world as it is now, where you've got a million different things coming at you from a million different directions, the first thing that you're going to think of is overexposure. There's too many people out there that are better than me with better equipment and better connections, so why even bother? But the fact of the matter is that, yes, there are a million out there, but there's only a few hundred really good ones.
Yep.
So if you can become one of the really good ones, then all the rest go away. At the same time, if you're using it as a means to an end, like I am, I'm not out there to try to gather followers. I'm out there to try to point people to something that they probably want to see or do. Right? So if you're a horror fan and you like to go to Dallas to Texas Frightmare Weekend, but it's a 4-hour drive in a hotel before you even get through the door, maybe I'm selling something that you want to buy, right? And so the more people that know about my show and what we're doing, I can connect them with what they want, and I get the resources to build it bigger. But you can do a niche market that's called the long tail. So if you look at, like, for example, what I'm in horror. Well, Halloween is a $7+ billion industry. It's second to Christmas, but it's closing on Christmas quickly, actually. Because kids are more into electronics and games, and the margins on those are a lot smaller. Halloween, you get the kids involved. You get a couple $100 worth of costumes every year, plus all the home haunt stuff, plus all the events, the haunted houses. It's money. So you can take the Halloween industry and you can go straight down. Okay, what makes Halloween? What is it? Well, Halloween is history. It's lore. It's parties. It's horror. It's movies. It's books. It's records. It's music. It's an entire universe of things. So sitting down here, I was like, okay, I want to just count. Like, if you just say the one word, so zombies, you can follow that long tail, and you can go comics, you can go novels, you can go movies, you can go to movie history, special effects, DIY, haunted houses, home haunts, or you can go the other direction. You can go into the real history, which is like voodoo, and then the difference between Haitian and Louisiana, which brings you into music and bands, or it can take you in the other direction into folklore and religion even. So just one word, I counted up, I got 12 episodes. Right? If I'm doing a weekly episode, that's a quarter of my year plotted. Done. So then you do your research, you take your notes, call up Scott, say, hey, what are we talking about this week? And we go off, like I have several pages of this kind of note, and we don't hardly ever look at it, because something will come up in the news, and we'll talk about that instead.
Yep.
And it's taken a while to develop what our show actually is, but if you listen to the Scary Dad podcast, it's got an intro music. It's got an intro segment where we just talk about what's going on in our lives for 5 minutes. We have what's called Old Business. It's this day in history. So on this day in history, something happened, and if you hit like Wikipedia, it'll go all the way back to recorded history, and it'll tell you on this day Rome fell. You're like, oh shit, really important things happened, and we're sitting down to do a podcast, but hey, look, like the world turns, right? We take a break. I fill that break with old school commercials. So maybe like Count Chocula or something, you'll hear old vintage commercials. Then we go into new business. That's current events. That's upcoming movies. That's what somebody crazy in Florida just did with a snake. That kind of stuff. We take another break. Then we go into our actual show. And it's about anywhere from 20 to 40 minutes. We try to keep it a tight hour, a good commute length. We try not to go like way off into the weeds, because we figure if we have time for two hours, we got time for 2 episodes. So we'll hit stop, we'll rewind, we'll go, this is part 2 of Zombieland, and just go from there. Because the biggest and most important thing that you're going to need is content. You're going to need content, you're going to need content, and more content, and consistent drops. If you drop weekly, drop every week. If you've got more than weekly, drop in between. But if you record 2 episodes today, have one scheduled for this Monday and one scheduled for next Monday, and then if something comes up, you can drop something midweek or schedule it out. Yeah, that's probably the biggest tip that I could give as far as anything like that goes, is consistency. If you tell your audience that you go live on Tuesdays, go live on Tuesdays. I travel the country now for work, but I'm live on Tuesdays. Like, I'll Skype into my studio in Austin with my co-host, and like, I'll do it live from my hotel room. I don't care, but I will go live Tuesdays. And that's something that you absolutely have to do, is maintain that. You have to maintain a steady stream. Like I was saying earlier, with the descriptions being matching across Google, Google also likes you putting things out regularly. And on that note,
I think that brings us into the show preparation that he was talking about, because he was just discussing this very specific like setup of an episode. You guys get to decide how you want it. And like I said, listening to other podcasts that you like, you can totally steal their format. Like, there's no like format police or whatever. If you like it where at the top they talk about, one thing and then they discuss something different, great. If you want to put commercials up top, I know a lot of them do like a, hi, welcome to this, here's our ads for the week. You can do that, or you can do it in the middle, like Billy was saying, whatever you want. The other part of that I wanted to point out is in the spot where you do commercials, you can either do ads of products that you've set up, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, but also you can do ads for other podcasts, and I'll talk about that a little bit later too, about how you can help each other. Like, helping each other is part of the whole thing. This is not a competition. It's all the information that we have out there. Each one of us and the way we see the world is unique, and what we like is unique, and the way we will present it is unique, and people are interested in what we have to say. Because, when you're excited, you you sound more, it's like, oh, what is that person talking about? I've listened to full speeches on like 18th century, like, ships going underground. And I'm like, I don't care about ships. But this guy was so excited about it that I was like, yeah. Really? Is that how the wood broke apart? That's, I don't care. You know what I mean? Like, but I was super into it because he was excited. So whatever you're excited about, that has to come out in that. And so whatever way you think you could arrange your episode to have as much excitement to get people on board with you for that, I think is best. Yeah. Before I talk more about social media, though, talk about the show prep and all your organizational.
And I'll get through this pretty quick. Like Billy was saying, having notes is so entirely important. Once you've written those notes, once you've come up with your show descriptions, things like that, I highly recommend having a document. There's a copy of my Dudes and Beer document in there. I mean, it's literally your description, your episode description, title, link to the MP3, things that make it easy where you go from platform to just copy, paste, and make sure that stuff matches from platform to platform, that your episode description on iTunes matches your episode description on SoundCloud, matches it on Lisbon, matches it on Podbean, wherever you choose to go, even on YouTube, all that other stuff. One of the other important things to decide is whether or not you will have a website for your podcast. And that rings straight back to whether or not you're doing this for fun or whether or not you're trying to do this professionally. If you're doing it professionally, eventually it comes to the point that you will want to monetize, and the best way to monetize is through Google Ads, things like that, on a website. And then eventually directing your fans to your website to get your content instead of going to all of the different platforms. They come there, and
it's
everything's
also important to just have all of your stuff in your own pocket.
Yeah.
Politics aside, if you look at what's happening with Facebook and Google, and they change their algorithms, and then you have gatekeepers at those companies that decide what they like and what they don't. You've got companies like BuzzFeed that are circling the drain right now because they built their entire platform on Facebook shares, and now nobody sees them, so nobody's sharing their stuff. So you've got to build your own structure, and then you should be able, if anything changes with the way that they calculate their ad revenues, you've still got all your files down, backed up and on your server.
Exactly. Maintain copies of all your stuff. Have a hard drive that is dedicated to your podcast that has all that stuff on it. I cannot stress that enough. Back up. I've had websites that I've had for 5 years that I've had to go back through and rebuild, and thanks sweet baby Jesus for the internet backup archive, because half of it was there and I didn't have to rethink about what to type on 28 pages of a website. I could copy paste, and it makes it so much easier. But like Billy was saying, with all of that stuff in mind, one thing to really keep in mind especially is we were talking earlier about branding with intros, outros, stuff like that. Remember, if you're looking to make money and put it out on numerous platforms, even YouTube will mute you. You will now be muted on YouTube. You will now be muted on Twitch. How many Twitch users do we have in the house? Any Twitchers? All right.
Yeah.
A few of us. Even they will mute you if you use Allison Chan's is an intro music and you have not contacted Allison Chains or paid ASCAP for that, your episode entirely will be muted.
Another great way to use Fiverr. Find someone to compose you a 30-second intro, outro.
Yeah.
Do it yourself if that's what you're
Yeah, if you know a musician.
If you don't, I don't know.
Yeah.
Then you can get somebody to make it for you, or marry somebody who will.
Yeah. There are some great platforms out there. One of our main monetized platforms is Breach.tv. You can go check them out. They've actually preemptively gone through and signed contracts with ASCAP, BMI, all of these agencies that do copywriting on music. So if you are a DJ and you want to put your mixes out there like you used to be able to do, you can still do it and you can be monetized, and a percentage of your money goes straight to pay for the rights for that music already. So there's one platform where you can kind of skeeve by. There's always the fair use policy of hey, I only use 20 seconds. I'm using it for an educational purpose, things like that. But even then, you've got to go through a process on YouTube, on Twitch to be like, I can test this. And then you have to like show them the document. I've literally had episodes of the Talking Sound podcast muted when I am interviewing the musician who wrote the music.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, like,
Personal
that's the
videos of
dude.
Songs they wrote were muted on YouTube.
That's
so,
the dude that wrote the music on my show. And that gets us into some of the show prep things, like make sure and have yourself a nice little sheet like this. Like Billy was saying, have your notes. I've got one that I have generally for all of my shows. Just kind of helps me get my thoughts in mind. If you have guests, what their bio is, what they do, anything that they might want you to plug.
Yeah.
That way it's right there in front of your face. When it's in front of your face, you're a lot less apt to forget it.
Yeah,
Especially if you're drinking on air.
I don't drink while I'm on air, but I primarily do an interview podcast, so mine's a little different than theirs. I don't have a list necessarily that says, you know, this is what we're going to talk about, but I write a few questions. I do some research. People really appreciate when you look at their website.
Yeah.
Like if you're interviewing someone and you're like, I noticed that your website said, they're all like, oh, you read it? That's really nice. Like, because not everybody, you know, like, there's so many websites. You're not doing research, and there's a lot of podcasts that interview people that walk in and they're all like, howdy, stranger, what do you do? Like, no, I like to walk in and have knowledge of what they do. It makes your guests feel appreciated. It means that they are going to give you a better performance than they would if you walked in and you're all like, so what do you do? I hear you do the horror stuff. That's wild. Like, if you're like, I read about how you won this award last year, and very exciting. You're going to be on this thing. Tell me, if you act interested to your guests, they will give you a good show. We have both, all of us, I'm sure, had guests that were not excited, that were just like, yeah. You're like, cool, this is a talking thing. We need to talk. Like, you're like, how do you feel about this thing? And they're like, good. And let's talk more about that. Like, so you gotta do a little, and I say this even in general conversations with people, it's like, you gotta make people feel like they're special.
Yeah.
And then once they feel like they're special, they'll open up and they'll tell you more about whatever you want to talk about. So if you're interviewing, the best plumbers in Houston, tell them what a great drain they unclogged. And then you'll be like, without you, oh man, you're so great. And then they'll give you something, right? So,
yeah, I was going to say, don't forget the main thing about your guests is that they are there to share themselves with your audience. So my suggestion is have yourself a guest questionnaire that whenever you initially email them, once it's like, yeah, sure, I'd love to come on. Great, let me send you our questionnaire. And it just kind of gives them some control. Like, what things would you like to talk about?
Yeah.
It gives them a little bit of peace of mind. Like, what would you like to plug? You're coming onto the Dudes and Beer podcast. 2 weeks ago, we talked about the government disclosing UFOs. A week ago, we had the people from the city of Austin talking about their new backyard chicken program. And we just had a dude talking about water resources and why they matter to beer. So you're coming on to talk about your new movie. And it's one of those like, how do you carry that from one episode to another? How do you make sure that you're getting not only the best information out of your guest, but giving them the best guest experience as well, and giving your audience the best guest experience? How do you go about finding guests, Billy?
Our biggest thing is trying to find local. Like, we're very local centric. So if I'm cruising around on Twitter or whatever, and I find somebody that's got Houston in their hashtag or says they're Houston based, I will send them I'll check out their show or check out whatever it is they're doing, and I'll send them an email or a direct message and ask them if they were interested in being on the show. I'm also I'm on a couple of different Facebook groups for nerd culture type stuff, so people generally will promote. I also write, so I'm on a book club group and stuff like that. So anytime I see something that I think that it'll be a feasible, like we'll have rapport, or if somebody's promoting something, like a friend of mine opened a comic book store out in Katy, and actually he wasn't a friend of mine then, I barely knew him, but everybody was like, hey, support this guy, he's really giving it his all, and So Scott and I reached out to him like, hey, so we went out to his store and just talked about comics for an hour or so, and just gave him some free promotion, and we actually made a commercial for him and stuff like that. So we're starting to get more and more guests more and more often, but it's, again, ours is more focused on kind of bringing a community together and introducing everybody. So.
Yeah. Well,
To that end, can I just talk about community for
I
a
was
second?
just about to say, let's get into distributing stuff on social media and talking about community on social media.
Great, I'm so glad I'm on point. Based on, Billy was talking about joining Facebook groups. This is a great way to connect with a potential audience. If you're going for something specific, find other people that share that. I guess you're in a place right now where you're already finding people that are like-minded, right? So this is a great place to connect with people in a way that helps us build a larger community. We find out what things we share, and using hashtags, like Billy was mentioning, is very helpful. Coming up with 1,000 hashtags can feel weird to come up with words that describe what you're doing, but they so crazy help. Like, even though it seems like you're like, what am I writing down? Podcasting, I guess. But like, if you write down podcasting and somebody's interested in it, then they look, it's great. And it's amazing how hashtags are used. Even just you're finding somebody local by using the city hashtag, or it's like a specific topic. I try to find friends on all of the platforms that seem to make sense for what my podcast is. So I do comedy, and I do interviews with comedians, right? So I join Facebook groups of comedians. I join Facebook groups of people that like comedy. I'll find whatever the most popular comedy show is and join that group. Even if I don't watch the show because they like comedy, that's what they've established, they're going to be interested in other things. Not everyone's on every social media, and like we were even talking about earlier, the way we deal with social media is different. It's going to change. The way I used to do, I was putting tons of money into Facebook ads, but they're not functioning the way they used to. So you got to find different ways to get the information out there. It can function in a good way if you can play with it. If you have enough money to kind of throw a little money at it and test it out, you can find the new algorithm, I swear. I had no idea how to do any of it, and I got a bunch of response to Facebook ads for a while, and then they just tweaked it, and now I just got to chase them to figure out how they did it, right? But that's how we got to do all the things with the internet, because they changes all the time. But there's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Twitch, Tumblr. I'm sure there's a million others that I'm not even mentioning, right? And they're all very specific. Find where your people are and then make friends. It's not always, like I said, it's not about competition. It's not about like, oh, I have a comic book podcast and you have a comic book podcast. We're enemies now. It's like, no. We are one group. We are helping each other.
Those are the people that you get together with quarterly and you do a crossover episode.
Yeah.
You share audience.
There are hashtags out there, hashtag PodSwap, for when two podcasters go on each other's, podcast. That's great. Like, how wonderful that there's like a whole thing where people are trying to connect with each other. The other thing that has been huge for me, and some people don't like Twitter, but for me, it is just, it's so much to me. Making friends with other podcasts on Twitter, connecting with them, getting connected to other podcasts in groups that send out individual messages. People will retweet each other. I went from like 2 or 3 retweets every episode to like hundreds, because now I have this whole dedicated group of people who have agreed we will help each other and we will go and retweet each other's stuff, and it just sends the information out into the universe in places you wouldn't expect. My little avenue of the internet only has these people in it. But when all these other people send it out, it goes to people all over the place, and who knows? I had somebody contact me from Canada and say, can I be on your podcast? I make movies in Canada. Yeah, absolutely you can, right? How'd you hear about me? You're in Canada. But it got out there, right? Because that's how we spread the word. It's about working together. A lot of things, especially when it comes to things like monetization, like we're talking about, you feel like you're in competition with other people, but you're not. We are all together. The money is for everyone. Yeah. We're not, when you're starting like we are not already famous. We are not millionaires to begin. And we don't have an existing fan base, right? So we have to build it all from scratch. And the best way to do it is to team it up. is to get a team together and to help each other rise. And once that works out, I mean, that's when we decided to connect as a network. We had all these friends that had been helping each other up, and we're like, wait, if we connected as a network, we could then use that to lift each other up. And it's been very helpful along the way. It has spread the word in a way that, I mean, we live in a dark, dark world, guys, I understand. But like
God,
the
it turned
fact
into a
that
Dudes and Beer episode.
the fact that like you can get work done by sharing and community warms my heart like so crazy. Like the fact that that's real and can work is amazing. So help each other out, be there for each other. It's really important to do that.
Also, just as a segue to social media, if you go all the way back to like MySpace, and it was just this race to friends. You go to Facebook, race to friends. Who has the most? You know, who has the most followers? Who has the most of this and that and whatever? The reality is, it's a value for value proposition.
Yeah.
Right. And you start off, and I did this whenever I first started off. You know, you got this mindset of, I need X number of followers in order to get to my next step. So it was very one-sided.
Yeah.
I need you to follow me, so I need to do what then? Like, I need to create something, obviously, that you want to follow, but also I'm going to go to those places where people follow back, right?
Yeah.
If you create your content and you have something for them to land on whenever they do follow you, that's pretty cool. You know. But number two, the way you get followers is to follow people. And it's also the way you get, you know, you build your social capital, is you go on Twitter and you follow 1,000 people. A couple hundred of them will follow you back. But your Twitter feed then is full of stuff that you like. You do a search for horror, it's so much more entertaining. So then you're pulling your value out of being entertained while you're also trying to build an audience. And you know, you kind of, depending on how it does, they'll suggest different ones for you to follow. People follow back, they'll be interested, and it'll trickle. Yeah. It'll trickle for a while, and it'll trickle a little bit more, and then one day it'll break, and you'll wake up and you'll hit your button, and it'll be like, you got 32 new followers. And you scroll down, and none of them are bots. You're like, wow.
Yeah, these are actual quality followers. And on that note, we have just a few minutes left. We'd love to take some questions from anyone that has anything they'd like to ask. Yeah, right over here.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Never be sorry for taking notes.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get back to that quickly. So I'm talking, I guess something that I want to improve. I'm like 4 episodes into the podcast I'm actually making. And one of the things I'm trying to improve is getting better at interviewing people. And
Okay.
talking about, obviously better questions from research, making the skills for
Sure.
and the guest questionnaire was a good tool.
Oh, yeah.
Do you have anything else on top of that?
Really, a lot of it has to do with whenever I approach guests, even whenever I approached guests when I was on broadcast for my host, it was something that, hey, I caught your article online the other day. I just did an episode, like we were just talking about this on air the other day. I would love to have you come on to share this with my audience. The concept of, number one, everybody likes talking about themselves. I've taught ages 4 to 40. The only difference is by 40 you should know better than to pull people's hair. Other than that, we all love to talk about ourselves, everything else. So, like I said, the guest questionnaire is a good thing because it gives them a chance to, like whenever we had the water commissioner guy on the other night, he came in and it was so great. It was obvious he'd been on radio shows because he's like, so here's a list of things that I'd like to possibly talk about. And I was like, oh, you're great. I love having you on. But never be afraid to let your guest give you questions. Other than that, remember why you're having them on. You're having them on because quite obviously you are like jazzed about something that they're into. So, you know, why did you get into this? That's half of what the Talking Sound podcast is about. I interview other people in my industry, and it's like, the stories I get from people, like I have a lighting friend who does lighting direction, and he used to fly friggin' jets for Continental. Like, homeboy used to fly commercial jets and went, nope, want to be a lighting designer.
Who needs money, right? I hate it.
And now he's like touring the country, touring the world, doing rock and roll shows and stuff like that. But it's like, dude, you used to like fly commercial jets, bro.
Another thing is you don't necessarily have to stick exactly to the subject at
Yeah.
hand.
Oh my God, no.
People like to talk about themselves. So, you know, you can talk about where you're from, what got you into this, your road to where you are. You know, how did you become? Where did you come from? And a lot of that because as they're speaking, then you start to get to know them. So you say, okay, so how did you become a podcaster? Okay, well, back in 2012, I started this fantasy. So, 5 minutes, 10 minutes later, you got 5 minutes worth of content, but then you've also got several notes and jots and questions, and you're like, okay, so that Twitter thing, tell me more about that. And so you can kind of lead off of their conversation and stay engaged. So, so you don't have to sit there and be like, so, like if you're talking about a movie, so who does the lights? Who does the camera? Who does the action? You can get to know the person behind the reason they're there.
And we'll let Amy respond that unfortunately we have to wrap up so we can get ready for the next panel.
Oh.
But
the one thing I was going to say is that one tip to get people more likely to talk is to compliment them.
Yeah.
I know that sounds false that I'm telling you to do that, but if you have somebody on your podcast, you don't hate them, right? So give them a compliment.
Yeah.
Tell them something they did that you think is good. It eases their mind. It lets them know like I said, we live in a harsh world. We expect people to be rough to us, and we walk into a room always being like, nobody's gonna like me. We are all the same, don't worry. And that is like giving them a compliment, making them feel comfortable. That's how you get the ball rolling. And that's how you get the audience to like you. They feel comfortable with you, they're interested in it, and they want to be part of your journey. We have a mailing list thing up here for any of you guys. Everyone, please take the papers that we left there for you. That packet is for you with all the information that we talked about. Please join our mailing list right here, and we'll send you more information. If you have questions, we'll send out like a hi, how you doing? And you can send an email back to us with any questions that we can do to help you. We are always available for you.
Feel free to go to the HC Universal Network webpage. You can contact us there with any questions that you have. We do have a free app where you can listen to all of the shows on the network. It's on Google Play right now, coming soon to iTunes here in the next couple weeks. It's going through the approval process right now. But thank you guys so much for coming out. Thank you so much for Comicpalooza for having us. And we'll be around here for the next couple minutes as we close down if you guys have any other questions.
Yeah, we'd be happy
All right.
to talk to you
Any questions you
anytime.
have?
Thank you.
Take care. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you guys so much. Thank you.
This is Talking Sound.